This is the second video for our class, Theory of Ethics, Philosophy 2310 at Marquette University. The second video on Kant's Grounding the Metaphysics of Morals. The first video concerned the preface to that work and gave us a kind of introduction to what's coming. Here we begin the work of unpeeling the onion. That is, I used the onion model, I mentioned the onion model earlier, and so we'll begin to look at what morality involves. Now here, the title of this section is very important. So we will begin with ordinary rational knowledge of morality that's common to us all. But we'll make a transition from that into the philosophical, because what he will show is that the foundations for what we hold as moral beliefs and moral views, in fact, is founded deeply in philosophy and not just a matter of opinion. So that's the focus here. The titles to all three of these sections of Kant, this is the first, there are two more to come, the titles are very important because they point exactly to where he's going and what he intends to establish. So here we're going to see him establish then the philosophical nature of ordinary moral knowledge as we have it. So let's proceed. First of all, the good will. For Kant, the good will is the only thing that is good without qualification. That is, it's absolutely good. If you have the good will, you will never intentionally or willfully do anything bad. If that's the case, and if the moral value of actions is tied up in the intention and not the outcome, then it would seem that if we have the good will, we have everything that we need to be good moral persons. Hence, we need to form in ourselves the good will. Now, Kant gives a conceptual analysis of this. That is, he analyzes the notions involved in the terms. And will, and that we'll see in what follows, but will involves intention. And again, intention is key to morality for Kant. So let's look at how he does this. First of all, he considers the issue of natural talents and good fortune. And he finds that these are not absolutely good or good without qualification, because natural talents and even good luck and good fortune can be turned to bad use. Hence, they can't be considered as absolutely good. Their abilities, the abilities of people with natural talents and the gifts of good fortune, these are able to be used for good or ill. And so they're not to be considered absolutely good the way the good will is. And he then gives indications of this. For example, we regard very highly people who possess outstanding natural talents or have this good fortune, but we regard them very highly only when they display the good will. If they show ill will and dominance or control of others with these powers, we say that they're not using them properly. They're abusing them in some sense. Further, we don't feel pleased or delighted to see someone with these good things when the person does not have good will. So we expect the person who wins the lottery not to be nasty and self-centered in every way, but we expect them to be generous in some fashion. And so we're not pleased when we see someone who has good fortune and does not share it with others. Further, another indication, mean-spiritedness or ill will seems to rob these people from the deservedness of such goods. We're happy when the person who is in poverty wins the lottery and speaks of doing good things, but when they speak of now they can control the reality around them, they can control other people, they can buy whatever they want, they can have all the drugs that they want, we think that this robs the deservedness from their situation completely. And further, things that are conducive to the good will do not have the absolute and unconditional value of a good will. That is, they're not absolutely valuable. They can be used for ill. And yet, if you have the good will, by the very meaning of the terms, you will always will for what is good. That does not mean we immediately understand what's good, but you will for the good if you possess the good will. And that means then that you will not use it badly or not intentionally use the good things that you have badly. Hence, without goodwill, many otherwise admirable things can be put to evil use. But when we have the goodwill, and we act in accord with it, then we cannot possibly, in any intentional way, make use of the admirable virtues or good fortune that we've had. So the goodwill would filter all of our actions, ideally, if we are possessors of goodwill, and everything would be done with the intention of doing good and not of doing evil. So the goodwill for Kant is not good because of its effects, the outcomes, right? Because I've already stressed the importance of intention here. He goes on to assert that we value the effort represented in the goodwill, regardless of whether or not the good end or outcome sought by the person of goodwill in his or her actions is achieved. That is, we value the effort, we value the intention in the action, and that's key for Kant. Now, what about happiness? We talked about happiness in Aristotle at some length. And remember, for Aristotle, happiness, the purpose of happiness, the purpose of reason was to serve happiness. Happiness was our absolute goal, our absolute end. That's which we focus on the most. And reason was a tool to be used in the attainment of happiness. It was not a sure guarantee, but it was the best guarantee that we had, or the best effort that we could make toward attaining happiness for ourselves. I mention this because you'll recall that for Aristotle, we have to have luck or good fortune, in addition to our own virtue. So in Aristotle's view, as Kant puts it forward here, this is the guide to happiness, the proper use of our reason for this. And the end or ultimate value of our actions is to consist in happiness, or the kind of fulfillment involved in this. Now, what about Aristotelian teleology? Remember, with regard to Aristotle, I mentioned the term teleology, and I said it's giving a telos, the end, and a logos. A logos is an account of, so teleology is an account of the goal or the end. And for Aristotle, nature does nothing in vain. And so for Aristotle, it seems that nature has given human beings reason in order that they can fulfill themselves with excellence and attain happiness. Again, if they have good fortune. But Kant asserts that reason is not a competent guide to happiness, because those who have reason are not absolutely, in every case, guided to happiness. And yet Kant wants something firm, and he finds that in the goodwill. So the true function, according to Kant, the true function of reason, according to Kant, is to produce a goodwill, which is not merely good as a means to some further end, but is good in itself. So what's the role of reason? Not, for Kant, not happiness. He says, don't worry about happiness. You will naturally seek that out. That's part of our nature, to seek out happiness for ourselves. But rather, the real purpose of reason is to produce a goodwill in us. So reason is a guide to making ourselves good moral persons. And the key to being a good moral person is to have the goodwill in you and to act in accordance with it in every single action that we do. So, according to Kant, reason has as its highest practical function the establishment of the goodwill. It serves that and not happiness. So as far as Kant's concerned, we will naturally seek out happiness, and we shouldn't worry about that. What we should worry about is being good moral persons, and reason will help us in that regard. So reason's function then, to repeat, is not to produce happiness, something at which it's very inefficient according to Kant, but rather the function is to produce the goodwill. This is, Kant stresses, the only good thing, the only thing good without qualification. The only thing, I should correct that, the only thing which is absolutely good. So if you have the goodwill, you can never intentionally do a bad thing. And notice here, you should take notice here that Kant is not focused on the outcomes of our efforts. He's focused on the effort that we put into things, the intention that we put into things, into our actions, and not the outcome. So the moral value of an action, for Kant, as we will see later, the moral value of an action lies in the intention with which the action is done, not the outcome. So what is the content of the good will? What exactly is it? We've used it in general terms so far, with a general understanding of what this term would be, but what does it actually consist of? Does it have certain specific laws and ordinances in some way? He's going to repeat this several times now. What he does in what follows here is quite repetitive, but he's trying to explain and get across to us the real meaning of the good will. So what is it directed toward? The good will is directed toward, or rather directs itself toward, itself and us toward, is duty. And by duty here he means moral duty. That is, doing what we ought. So it directs us toward actions which are not done as a result of or in conjunction with inclinations or selfish purpose. We're doing things that are morally right. It directs us toward doing things that are morally right and not just things that we want to do or we're inclined to do or we selfishly want for ourselves. So the good will directs us toward doing what we ought. That is our moral duty. So, to put it another way, we should simply do what is right for no other reason than that it is what is right. So for Kant, this is not because there is some psychological, physical, financial, emotional, or other benefit in it for us. We do what's right because it's right. And we do it because it's our duty. Now, a duty is an obligation. And we have an obligation to act in accordance with our own understanding with regard to the attainment of what is right and good. And we are able, for Kant, we are able to form in ourselves the notion of what is morally right. And to act in accordance with your duty as a rational being is to act in accordance with morality. So, the definition of duty: when an action is done for duty's sake, that is, when it is done because it is our duty or because it is what is right for us to do, then that action has moral content. Now notice this: when we do what we ought to do for the very reason that it is what we ought to do, then there's moral content to it. If we're doing what we ought to because we're going to make money, in addition to doing what's right, for Kant then it's ambiguous, and the motive is not clear. Now remember, I had said that Kant goes inside the self, and morality is looked at from inside the self. So motive or intention with regard to actions is key for Kant. So if your intention in doing the kind of thing that you ought to do is that you'll make more money eventually by being a person of good character, that's the wrong reason. You have to do it because you are committed to doing whatever your mind presents to you as the right thing to do, as your duty as a moral person. So what is central or key for Kant is this: purity of motive, as I just indicated. The motive of doing what is our duty because it is our duty and not because of some outside or extrinsic consideration such as self-interest or natural inclination. Both of those taint or undermine the moral purity and the moral value of action. If someone acts and there's a benefit in that for the person, then we question why the person is acting. Is the person acting for the benefit, or is the person doing what is right? When people donate money to Marquette University, if they insist that a building be named after them, it's pretty clear that one of the reasons that they're making the donation is for their own notoriety, a very positive notoriety in the community. But if they give money and they say, use this in the best way you know, and don't bother to put our name on it, make it an anonymous donation, then it's very clear that the people don't have any other motive than to do what they think is right with regard to the support of education. There's not anything obvious that they're getting out of it for themselves. Now, Kant takes up this issue of self-preservation and duty. And by self-preservation, he means saving ourselves from suicide. So, according to Kant, preserving your life, or self-preservation takes on moral value when we have a desire for death and yet refrain from suicide because of our respect for ourselves and our value as rational beings. So the person who has cancer and is dying of cancer, or has Alzheimer's, perhaps, according to Kant, this person, when desiring death because of the chaos and the pain and these other things in life, that person, if he or she refrains from committing suicide, something that actually is legal, right, in Oregon and elsewhere, if refrain from committing suicide, then that is an act of respect for themselves as rational beings. Now, we will see a different approach to this entire issue in Alan Donegan's theory of morality, but this is Kant's view. So self-preservation is absolute, and respect for ourselves precludes or requires that we abstain from taking our own lives. Because, among other things, if we are absolute values in ourselves and deserve respect, then to terminate our own lives is to show a lack of respect, at least in the view that Kant has. And again, we'll see something different in Donegan's theory of morality. So, happiness. As I said earlier, we do have an indirect duty to secure our own happiness, but natural inclinations taint any moral value of this because we are naturally inclined to seek our own happiness. And again, as I said earlier, Kant says, don't worry about it. You're naturally inclined to seek happiness. What you need to worry about and use your reason over is the formation of a good moral character in yourself, and you do that by using your reason to form in yourself the good will. Because by definition, a good will cannot be used badly. What about the issue of love? Can love be something commanded? Love of neighbor be commanded? According to Kant, yes. This is a moral command. So the practical love found in Scripture can be commanded. That is demanded of us of our duty. It's not an emotion. It's not emotion then, but a moral command or law which can be considered a duty placed upon us. This is an example of a duty which further reveals the nature of duty as law or command. But as we'll see, the whole foundation for this is the fact that we are rational beings. And our rationality enables us to take control of our lives and to choose to do what is right. And so we use that rationality to form in ourselves the good will, and then we can express love, that is respect, right? Love here is synonymous with another word, respect. And that's found in Scripture, but Kant brings it out and says this is required of us as rational beings. So from this reflection on these considerations, we can now list three propositions of morality according to Kant. The first proposition of morality is this: the moral worth of one's action depends on the actions being done from duty alone. The moral worth of one's action depends on the actions being done from duty alone. So, you must be doing what is right because you are committed to being a right doer, a person who does what is morally right. If that's your commitment, then whatever the next issue is that comes up, you are committed to doing what is morally right. And the moral value of your action depends upon your commitment to doing your duty. Not because it's convenient, not because it's beneficial to you, but doing your moral duty because it is your moral duty. Second of these propositions of morality. I quote it here for you, and I'll explain it to you in detail. Pardon me. An action done from duty has its moral worth not in the purpose that is to be attained by it, but in the maxim according to which the action is determined. Moral worth depends on the principle of volition according to which the action has been done. Now let me translate this for you. So, an action done from duty has its moral worth not in the purpose to be attained by it. So you do something, and the moral value of that action is not what's to be gained by it, but it's going to be in the intention, because you don't know whether you'll actually achieve it. But the very intending and trying to do the action, that's where the morality lies. He goes on to say then, but in the maxim according to which the action is determined. Now the maxim, he means the descriptive condition, the reason why you're doing it. So the reason why you're doing this, and you determined this certain action to do, is because you are a person who does what's morally right. It's an action done from duty. In this context, then, I'll continue with this, moral worth depends on the principle of volition according to which the action has been done. And the principle of volition here is the reason why you willed it. So moral worth depends on the reason why you willed the action. If you willed the action for selfish reasons, or to get money, or power, or pleasure, or something of that sort for yourself, that's wrong. If you willed it because you believe in the moral law, and you assent to the moral law, you agree to the moral law, and you're trying to, as much as possible, realize the moral law in yourself by means of the good will you've formed in yourself, then the action has moral value. But if there's an ulterior motive, it does not have moral value. It must represent a commitment by the person doing the action to the moral law. It must represent a commitment to doing what is right because it is right. And third, duty, the definition of duty here, very clearly, duty is of course it means moral duty here. Duty is the necessity of an action done out of respect for the law. That is the moral law. So when you respect moral law, you must follow what is your duty, what the moral law says you ought to do. It is a necessity. It is necessary for you to do that. Otherwise, you're not a follower of the moral law, and you're also not a person of goodwill. So in all of this, as I've said several times already, the moral worth of our actions is not constituted in the outcomes or the ends to be attained. Rather, he says, quote, the preeminent good which is called moral can consist in nothing but the representation of the law itself. So first of all, the moral good consists in a representation of the moral law itself. You're acting in accordance with the moral law itself. You have that in mind. And he goes on then, and he says, and such a representation can admittedly be found only in a rational being. So it's only in human beings who have reason, who can make these kinds of commitments and understand them, insofar as this representation, and not some expected effect, is the determining foundation of the will. So you form the intention, you know what you're intending, you've thought about this, you make your choices, you make an intention, you try to do some action, and that's where the morality lies, in the trying to do some action. Of course, this trying is not just a simple wanting or something of that sort, but it involves the use of reason as a rational being should. So there's an obligation here on us to use our reason to figure out what the right thing is and then to act on it. But if you're doing it for some expected effect, some other thing you want out of it besides just doing what is in accord with the moral law, then you've got a bad intention. You're not after what is right because it's right. You're after what is right because it can make you more money, or make you feel good, or make you feel proud. And these are not proper motivations for morality. The proper motivation for morality is, as a rational being, to make yourself be a person who seeks to look after and find his or her own duty, and acting in accord with it. So this is a kind of a law. But what kind of a law is it? What Kant's discussing here is making ourselves conform to a law as such, and making it serve the will as its principle. So what guides us in our actions? What's going to guide us in our actions of goodwill? We use our reason to figure out what we ought to do. And when we figure out what we ought to do, we make our will conform to it. So there's two steps here. We have to figure out what the right thing is. We figure objectively, what is the right thing? And then subjectively, on an individual basis, I have to use my will to make me do that right thing. So as he puts it here, that is to say, the principle which the will is following or conforming itself to is that it will be dutiful or lawful. That is, morally dutiful or lawful. So we commit ourselves the rest of today or the rest of our lives that we will do our very best to conform our will in accordance with what reason tells us is morally right. Now, he's concrete about this. So let's look at it in detail here. So this is this issue here that he puts forward here. The notion he puts forward here is the categorical imperative. Categorical means absolute, no exceptions. And imperative means command. So he's not just staying with all these generalities. He's going to give you a precise guideline for acting. It's as if you should have this in a card in your wallet or purse, and then when you're about to take any moral action, check it against this. Really, in that sense, check it against this. And he says there's one categorical imperative, one absolute command in accordance with which human beings must act if they are to be moral. And you must be moral. It's required as a rational being. So there are 4 of these, and I want to look at each one. And you'll see that the one that you're most familiar with is the 4th one. So first, the one on the side of your margin in the book, at page 402, those are the numbers to the German text, he says the following: I should never act except in such a way that I can also will that my maxim should become a universal law. Maxim here means the reason according to which I am acting. So I should never act except in such a way that I can also will that my reason for acting, or my maxim, should become a universal law. So I can't say that my maxim, steal whenever you have the opportunity, I can't make that a universal law, not because of the outcome, but because it will be contrary to my fulfillment as a rational being and to my fulfillment of the good will. Let's look at some other instances of this. I give you these numbers here. There are 4 of these. The second is at 421, third is at 421 also, and the 4th, which you're familiar with, is at 429. So at the categorical imperative number 2, again, he thinks that there's one categorical imperative that can be expressed in 4 different ways here. This is on page 421 in the margins of your text. And he writes, hence there is only one categorical imperative, and it is this: act only according to that maxim, and remember, rule of behavior, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. By universal law, he means it should apply for everybody. So this is what is often called the universalizability condition, and that is for any action that you're going to do, it has to be the kind of thing that it would be good or permissible for any human being to do that action. The third version is this. He says, accordingly, and this is at 421 again, a little farther down from the previous one, accordingly, the universal imperative of duty may be expressed thus: act as if, now the universal imperative, the universal command with regard to our moral duty may be expressed this way: act as if the maxim, again the rule guiding your action, maxim of your action, were to become through your will a universal law of nature. That is a universal law of all reality. Act in that way. So what principle are you acting on? You must act as if that's going to be a universal law for all human beings. Again, the universalizability principle. And finally, the 4th one, which is not at 421, but rather it's at 429. So let me fix that. 429. And I'll fix that right here, 429. And it's this: the practical imperative will therefore be the following. Here it is: act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end and never simply as a means. Now that last part, always at the same time as an end or absolute value, and never simply as a means to be used. In other words, treat everyone with absolute respect and never simply use another person. This is extremely important because this is what you were taught in kindergarten. So regardless of whether your teachers know it, this notion of respect, that 7-letter word, comes from here, right here in Kant, and in the German page 429. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end and never simply as a means. That is, you must always show respect to all persons, yourself and others. Yourself, don't forget that. Yourself and others as absolute values and never simply as means. You cannot use a human being for another thing. Human beings are to be respected. So these are practical guides. These are practical actions, practical rules that guide us in our actions. So you should check every single thing that you do with regard to the interaction of other people or with regard to yourself against the respect principle. If I do X, am I showing respect to myself? Now, I want to add one more thing in this. And if that X, if I steal something from a person, do I show respect to that person? Now notice there are two instances here of the denial of respect. When you do something immoral, such as lie to someone or steal from someone, the first person to whom you show disrespect is yourself. The second is the other person who's going to be harmed by your action. So take notice of this. It's important that he says here, whether in your own person or in the person of another. Okay, so you must, there's a demand here, a demand that you show respect for yourself. And showing respect for yourself requires a lot of hard work because it's not easy. It's not a simple matter. You have to figure out in every situation what respect for yourself demands and what respect for others demands. So that was all section 1. This is section 2, and I'm going to pause here then rather than go on to section 2, and I'll make another video with regard to section 2. So let me stop this video for now. I'll upload it and send you the link as soon as possible.